Hi, and welcome to another episode of Out of the Box. So today, I am going to be talking about a question that I've asked myself a number of times in the past, and which I think is very, very important in the culture that we live in. And that question is being rational sufficient for truth and knowledge? Or do we need to go beyond reason, logic, rationality for true knowledge? Now, knowledge, it is true. A lot of it is based on using reason. Reasonableness is fundamental in philosophical thinking. In fact, the use of reason is a essential human characteristic. Plato argued that what defines us as human beings is the fact that we have this ability for reason, for thinking rationally. It is something that differentiates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. Although I think some people might argue that today we've seen that there are examples of non-human entities that are capable of some form of reason. In any event, it is, I think, unarguable that reason is a very, very important human characteristic, and that human beings have it in abundance. So the capacity for reason that human beings have is what allows us to gain knowledge. We've used it for a very long time as the basis for going out and discovering and understanding the world that we live in. And in fact, I don't think it's in any way contentious that reason is the basis for much of philosophy. And as I said, I think that a lot of people would say that reason is the basis, the fulcrum for all knowledge. So is that the case? Is reason everything that we need in order to gain knowledge and wisdom, truth, knowledge, wisdom? Is it sufficient, or are we missing something when we negate other forms of thinking as possible means to achieve knowledge? So I'm going to talk about this in relation to a very important philosopher that I know we've all heard of. You probably have heard of him, Socrates. He is often the person who is considered the father of Western philosophy. Let me just say something about this. There's a tradition of philosophy that existed before Socrates. The philosophers that I'm talking about are often lumped together, and they're called the Pre-Socratics. And I'm going to do videos on the Pre-Socratics because I think that the Pre-Socratics have gotten a bit of shortchanged, being sort of labeled simply Pre-Socratics. I think that they had some very, very important ideas and contributed to philosophical thinking. And I would even venture to say that philosophers like Socrates and Plato would not be the philosophers that they are without the Pre-Socratics. I mean, they stood on the shoulders of the Pre-Socratics and incorporated the ideas of the Pre-Socratics into their philosophical models. In any event, I think that at least in a popular sense, Socrates is called the father of Western philosophy, and let's just go with that for the moment. So Socrates was born in 469 BC in Athens, and Athens was a Greek city-state. It was a flourishing Greek city-state, and Socrates happened to be alive at a time when free thinking was allowed. That free thinking was something that was allowed for a particular point in time, and later on, of course, it was suppressed. And I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but I may get to that in another video. In any event, as Socrates grew older, he began to question conventional beliefs that were held by his fellow Athenians. And what he would do is frequent the streets of Athens, and he would stop strangers, passers by, and he would ask them questions, irreverent questions about their opinions. For example, he would ask questions like, what is justice? What does it mean? What do all just acts have in common? And he would probe people. He would ask them questions about things like virtue, knowledge, morality, religion. And he was unrelenting. He would continually question them, and he would try to understand the reason for their opinions. Now, this continual questioning essentially dug into people's systems of beliefs. And oftentimes what Socrates would do was deflate people's cherished certainties. He would expose their certainties for being empty and really without foundation. And as you can probably imagine, this was not always received well. People became very annoyed at Socrates because he would essentially pull the carpet from under people's feet, and he would make them confused about what they believed in. So even though Socrates' persistent questioning of traditional habits of thought left many people puzzled, many people also came to recognize how important it was to actually look inward and to understand the reason why we believe the things that we believe. Why do we hold certain cherished ideas as being fundamental, and what's the logic behind them? So he basically had two groups of people around him: the followers, the people who understood the basis for his questioning, and then another group of people who were angered with Socrates and would just try to stay away from him as much as possible. Now, people's anger with Socrates was compounded often by the fact that Socrates gave no answers to many of the questions that he asked. He would just leave people confused. So people would leave thinking, well, I thought I knew something, but now I realize that I don't know anything, and I don't even know what the right answer is. So that would increase people's resentment toward Socrates. But the reason that he did this was because he wanted people to realize that they do not have good answers to questions. He wanted the people of his time to realize this, but he was also, I think, talking to any people, including ourselves. So, I would venture to suggest that he was, in fact, talking to any human beings that lived or that will live in the future, including us. In all his questioning, Socrates undermined the beliefs of the people with whom he was engaging in a dialogue with. And the way he did this, and now I'm getting to the crux of this video, the way he did this was by using reason. Reason for Socrates was a tool. It was a method to get as close to the truth as possible. Socrates was of the belief that there is an absolute truth, and that it is possible to get to that truth by way of reason. Now, Socrates used reason in a very specific way. It was a method which has come to be known as the Socratic method. Socrates would engage in dialogue. It was a method that was rooted in give and take. He would pose a question, and then someone would answer the question, and that's where it would begin, and there would be a give and take type of dialogue between Socrates and one person or a group of people regarding a particular question. So this was known as the Socratic method. Now, later on, this Socratic method evolved and was modified into something very, very specific, and it became what we think of as the dialectic. It was known as a dialectic. So the Socratic method is a form of cooperative, argumentative dialogue between individuals based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and to draw out ideas and underlying presuppositions. In the dialectical method, which is a more formalized version of what I just described, is based on dialogue of arguments and counter-arguments advocating propositions, which are known as theses, and counter-propositions, known as antitheses. And the outcome of the dialectic might be the refutation of a relevant proposition, or a synthesis, or a combination of the opposing assertions, or a qualitative improvement of the dialogue. So basically, as you can see, logic is the basis for truth here. Truth is discovered by gradually eliminating contradictions in logic. It may take time. Actually, it might never happen. But the underlying assumption is that if we try hard enough, and if we use the method of dialectic, we may, in the end, actually be able to get to the truth. But the point is that using this method, we're heading in the right direction. The dialectic allows us to discover truth in a way that is rational and rooted in reason. The dialectic also helps people have a better self-understanding, since it helps eliminate confused thinking and helps point the mind in the direction of what is logically consistent. And this, according to Socrates, is the method that is the basis for truth. And many philosophers since Socrates have accepted this idea that reason and logic is the most important tool for discovering the truth. The emotions, intuition, the visceral side of being human in contrast, is often considered dangerous and something that can lead us astray. But the question that I'm posing here is this an accurate and reasonable proposition? Is it actually the case that our more visceral side, our more intuitive side, should be suppressed and that the rational should be given full sway? Or is the intuitive side just as important as logic and reason? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Is reason the basis for all knowledge, or should intuition, our more visceral, emotional side, have some bearing on what we believe is the method to truth? Leave your comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you can, please subscribe to my channel. It'll inspire me to bring more videos to you. I hope that you enjoyed this little talk about Socrates and his ideas. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.